Varsågoda.
Tackar.
All right.
So let's,
Let's begin. Can we get maybe the image on screen? Thank you.
There we go.
All right, so ransomware, client-side, and crypto-based attacks. Incredibly popular types of attacks. I mean, it's always been like that, but it's very much more lately, last few years.
Yeah, last 5-6 years, something, we've seen a lot of increase. We're going to give you some of those background figures and the details, but I guess many of you guys here in the audience have been either involved directly in dealing with ransomware or seen somebody doing so. I hope no one of you have been forced to pay so far. You may be paying indirectly in terms of you need to do some things to restore the machines, or it's taking time, it's taking valuable time. You of course need to do some other things, but some kind of involvement, I guess you all seen.
It's a different type of cost, but still a cost.
Yeah. So let's start maybe with some basic definitions and then some background information.
Yeah. I mean, let's start with the basic idea. I'm sure all of you know, but what does ransomware do? Well, encrypts your files, and then denies access to the encryption key, and then they will ask for money, ransom to get the key, so you can go back to your files.
Yeah.
I would say in most cases you actually get a valid key to really decrypt.
We see a kind of evolution to this as well, as ransomware is not just focusing on consumer side anymore, but there is an enterprise version of it. So the enterprise version is not necessarily only about encrypting files. It could be crippling your access, prohibiting you from accessing your centralized system, your very important ticketing system, whatever that could be. I mean, the Marcus just showed you a quick about the San Francisco system. So it could be anything of that. It doesn't necessarily need to be limited to encrypting files anymore. So we'll look at more of the details of that particular case.
Okay. Should we start with a little bit of history, just to give some context and background?
Yeah.
So
it's always to try to understand, figure out where this all started. And of course, there are all different type of theories. It's the classic catch-22 and this as well. So where did it really start? Was it an academic project, or did it start in the wild? Sort of.
So we actually have the first recorded instance of ransomware in 1989. The malware was called AIDS, and it spread via floppy disk. It replaced the autoexec.bat file, and it was keeping account of how many times your system was booting. And when the count reached 90, it was hiding all the files and encrypt all the file names, even system files, so the system will basically be unusable. And then they would ask you to renew your license by sending some money to a post office mailbox in Panama.
Yeah, back in the days, no emails.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's
give me your real money. I don't want to have the electronic ones, no bitcoins, no such things. So, interesting.
So these guys were a bit ahead of their time. If only they knew. So, 96, we actually have a research paper written on cryptovirology, or the use of cryptology for malicious purposes. The guys actually implemented a proof of concept tool or malware that would encrypt your files and deny access to the key. So a theoretical approach to ransomware with a little practical tool.
And sometimes we feel pretty lucky that the bad guys are not really looking into the academic research papers that very much, but they're still doing something that is very close by this. So I guess those who are interested in the academic research world, they might get more heads up and more, hey, you guys can do this, what about this? And so it's always a challenge whether to publish these things or not, just to keep them, and how do we accomplish that task? We want to tell everybody that, hey, this is a risk, we're seeing this risk coming. It's maybe not immediately, it's maybe the next decade or something like that, and that was the particular case. It took a decade or so, or two maybe, for this to spread really, or start really to be a threat that we should count on. So it's interesting to see that kind of influence going on between the worlds.
Yep. So we jump to 2005. We can actually start seeing ransomware in the wild.
Yeah.
And we have, well, a few. One of those was GP Coder. It was using 1024-bit RSA encryption, and it was the most popular of these. And this is what it looked like on a Windows XP machine. It replaced your desktop background with this message. So, yeah.
This must have been very scary for those who get that. Yeah.
All right, so that was 2005.
Yeah.
Then, well, things in the wild have taken maybe a small break, but 2012 is when things really started to change, because we have Reviton. And this is the first that's been mass deployed. So enormous reach, a lot of infected systems. And they claim to be law enforcement organizations, which was actually localized, depending on the targeted country. They had a different message from a different organization. And the estimated payout was really impressive. It was $44,000 per day per country targeted. So that added up to $1.3 million per month for a single country targeted.
Yeah, very interesting business model indeed, at least looking at the revenue.
Yeah. So this is what the message looked like.
Yeah.
A message, in this case, from FBI telling you, yeah, there is something going on, so we blocked your computer. To unlock it, you need to pay $100 fine. And obviously, that success inspired a lot of other criminals to do something similar.
Just give an inspiration, and hey, if he could do that, or whomever that was, who could do that, I can do that as well. So let's try our luck.
Right. So here's when things really exploded. And then we start seeing, CryptoLocker, TorrentLocker, Tesla Crypt, Locky, and all of those. This is really the turning point. If we look at the year, 2015 was really, we just said in 2012 it really started to become popular in a lot of different variants. But then we have another big jump in 2015. And, well, there can be different reasons for that. I think one very interesting reason is that you could buy ready-to-use ransomware on the darknet.
So the evolution is that you don't need to create the thing yourself anymore. You don't need to be more creative than going to a shop and then buying a whole system, and then somebody will take care about all the details, all the fine prints for you. It's just ransomware as a service, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't need to build your gun anymore. You can go to a shop, buy a gun, and use it. That number, well, that's from McAfee Labs threats report. I
guess it's encounters or detections.
It's detections.
Yeah. So you will see similar numbers if you look at the Microsoft reports, Kaspersky, and so forth. So all of them will have these numbers based on encounters they do on their own systems.
And they have similar waves, whether it's reported infections or similar type of graphs. They all have this jump in 2015.
These figures are most often based on the payload dropper or the downloader. That's what gets detected most oftenly. And then the ransom itself, it's not persistent almost none of the time. So, so you probably didn't catch it. It's brand new or something like that. But yeah.
So you could buy one for $39 with full lifetime license. And then, you just need to take care of distributing it yourself and, make some money. All right. Ransomware as a service is a new thing. It's a very interesting business model. You actually don't have to do almost anything. Service is free. They only take a 20% cut. So what you do is you go on the site, on this .onion site, and you register an account for free. You log on, you tell it how much ransom you want to ask for. You give it a customized message for your victims.
Yeah.
And then you download a file, a .scr file in this case, a screensaver file, personalized for you with your custom message and ransom amount. Then you need to take care of distributing it. So that's your business. You send emails, you put it on a USB stick, and you give it out for free, whatever way you want to do it.
Yeah.
You take care of distributing it, but then you don't need to have any infrastructure yourself. So the site will actually keep track of the infections, and it will collect the ransom money. They will keep 20% and forward 80% to what we register as a receiving Bitcoin address.
So the hard work you need to do is to try to infect as many machines as possible. So that's your part of the deal.
Yeah.
They will take care about all the transaction for you, all the Bitcoin, everything, and then give you the 80%. What is the deal about? So, interesting model.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, and of course there are very good written, instructions about how to pay, where to send your money, and so forth. So.
Yep. Open source ransomware is also an interesting type of approach. Didn't used to be that way. I mean, old ransomware, you could either write it yourself or at some point buy it.
And once again, this is from two different aspects or two different directions. One of them is that certain kind of people dealing with ransomware want maybe to share with each other some ideas, and there are the other type of the world, which is okay, the research. What if we create an open source project just to simplify for everybody wondering what ransomware is all about? So we just want to give everybody that basic idea. This is a ransomware. This is how it looks like. This is how easy it is. So these are the two different factors in this, and of course, these two will borrow from each other's as we see the evolution goes.
So hidden tier, year 2015, it was the first published open source ransomware. Was published by Utku Sen, is a Turkish coder researcher, and it was a very simple piece of code. It was written in C#. It was really basic. It also had very basic flaws. Weak randomization, and the key was in memory, so you can just take it from there, or you could take it from the network traffic, because it was actually sent over an insecure channel.
For this particular one, you didn't need to have any advanced command and control center. You just pinpoint an arbitrary website, and it will send information about this client, that key. So a pair of information pieces related to where the infection was going on.
Yeah. So the only thing you need to have is some location that collects those requests and those keys. So this randomly generates a key and sends it over to the attacker.
Yeah. And of course, some guys took this and elaborated on this, and then we see that there has been other versions of other open source or semi-open source ransomware that were published later on based on this project.
So actually, the same guy made an improved version of it called EDA2, published same year. And it was a much better implementation.
So this one had a command and control center?
This one had a command and control center,
So you could actually control the behavior of the ransomware, so you can remotely maybe decrypt and stuff like that, so you don't need to rely solely on the person behind the keyboard. And probably do some other things if you would like to. Sell that access to that computer to somebody else and so forth. This is more of all of a sudden, a rat built into the ransomware.
Right, so of course, this better version was more attractive for criminals to actually base their code on. So the decryptor was a ransomware. Well, it's an example that was based on that project. And this is what it looked like. It's a very angry and scary Santa telling you in Russian and English to give some bitcoins.
This is a pretty recent one. This is 2016, right? Although it looks like
this one, Yeah.
Yeah, although it looks like the Windows XP version or Windows 95 version, but
Yeah. Well, it
the
wasn't Windows
basic
10.
concept still works the same. So scare somebody to death, and then they will pay.
Yeah. There were other examples. Magic was another one in January 2016, based on the same open source project. The creators of this one actually contacted the guy who published the open source code, and they told him to take the code down.
Yeah.
They didn't want it to be available to the public domain.
No,
They wanted to be the only one using it.
It's obviously disturbing their business model, so they feel probably bad about, oh, parts of the code we're using in our stuff are already on GitHub, so we don't want to have it there. Just make sure to remove it. So once again, maybe ransom the creator of the first open source version.
Yeah, actually, they did ask for a ransom to the guy. I don't think he ended up paying, but he ended up taking the code out, taking the code down, well, off the site. So it did that, but it was kind of late already. If we look in February, statistics from Kaspersky Lab, there were 24 encryptors in the wild based on these two open source projects, and probably more in the wild.
I guess some guys will go about blaming that person for why did you do that? Why did you publish that open source thingy or project? But I guess with or without him and his project, we will see probably the same type of evolution. It will more go in the darknet side of the whole thing and in the background. This is now going, or has been going, more open for everybody to see and observe what's going on. So it's a good, actually good insight into that world, how the evolution of these things are going on. So there are always good and bad things with these type of actions, but I guess the good is,
Yeah, the guy actually said that he implemented backdoors on purpose, especially in the second version. There was a backdoor on the command and control on server side, so if somebody got infected, he was able to log on to the attacker's server. Well, from the infected system, you can see where the attacker's server was. And then if it was implemented based on that one, there was a backdoor on the server, so you could actually retrieve the key without having to pay.
Yeah.
That was his idea, but of course, then he got threatened by someone to take it down. Okay.
Cool.
PowerShell, of course, couldn't miss the party. There is PowerShell ransomware, written entirely in PowerShell, Powerware.
Yeah.
It's been seen in the wild, delivered through a Word macro, which just runs some obfuscated PowerShell code.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, why PowerShell? Well, isn't it enough with doing C# or any other things that already exist in the platform as a Windows platform we're speaking about? Well, PowerShell is extremely powerful, extremely available at the same time. So you don't need to do much. You can just execute whatever scripts are. So given that fact, it's very easy and very convenient for those guys to use PowerShell. That's just another vector, another attack vector, or another exposure they can rely on. And they know that, hey, with enough people have installed Windows 10, we do have a very nice distribution base for PowerShell-based ransomware as well.
You have a question? Okay. The question is if there is any estimation on how much of the ransomware market is based on PowerShell, right? I think.
I guess it's really hard to tell right now, but what we need to do, we maybe need to look into those insights or reports delivered this year, end of this year or starting next year, to start seeing what, because this is just it's starting right now. We haven't seen PowerShell-based previous years, so this is pretty new.
Yeah.
Although we've seen things spreading through macros, but it's been VBA and that kind of stuff. So, so I'd say we need to wait and see exactly what the figures are, and then we probably have a lot of unknowns still. Exactly how many that. I mean, the big campaigns will be covered up, and then we will have statistics about that. But there are much smaller campaigns that will never get to the surface, so to be visible.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that is exploding these years. So as with everything that is exploding, we are in the phase that everybody has a new idea related to it, and it does it in a slightly different way. So we're in that phase right now, so we need to be ready for anything coming. And PowerShell is just one of them.
We've seen, I was on Redmond for a couple of weeks ago and had some presentations about these things from the PowerShell team, and there are all crazy things going on about obfuscation and trying to hide and all that kind of things. We'll present some of that in the next session, so you will see some of those details later.
Okay, this is also a recent one. Facebook messages. Well, it's actually an image, not a regular image, though. It's an SVG, scalable vector graphics image. It's a type of image that can contain active content. And it will be interpreted basically by your browser as a, well, it will contain HTML, basically. So the whitelist on the Facebook messaging functionality allowed this type of images, so attackers started to use that to spread malware and ransomware in this case. So once you open the picture, it will redirect you to a site that kind of look like YouTube, except it's not. And it will ask you to install a codec extension to watch this video. Yep.
So that gives, this is a little bit combined phishing and classic ransomware distribution. Like we use active content. I mean, we're not using that much of Flash anymore. I hope you guys are not doing it at least. So the targets will shift and move, and they will start looking at other type of rich media vectors to put whatever redirection possibilities and all other kind of possibilities in them. Like the SVG, it's a very old format. I still remember when it was introduced to do some 3D rendering on our web browser, but it didn't take off really. Now there is a revival, maybe.
Okay, so what does it really mean to be infected? What are the requirements for your machine to be infected? Well, of course, the attacker needs to run some code. That's basically what it is, whether it's for an entry point for a targeted attack for a certain high-value target, or whether it's for deploying ransomware. You need to run code on a victim system in some way. And you need to deliver that code in some way through some vector. And we can have different ways of having that code taking a certain path.
So the basic, as said, these are two actions. First, make sure that a user get interacting with the delivery method. The delivery method could be anything. I mean, we're just listing some most popular things here. Delivered by email, delivered by you going to a website, you're browsing around the net, and you'll be presented by a question about installing a plugin or something like that, or you need to download this file, or there is a drive-by download. You can use all these categories, or you're encountering an offline media, a USB stick, or anything. We're actually listing e-cigarettes there because these has been a vector to spread malware, including ransomware. So anything that plugs into your computer that may include a file or may in some way make your computer perform any instructions like keyboard simulation or anything similar to that. So these are just some of the vectors you might imagine or might encounter. And then the next step will be, once we got that downloader, the first step on your computer, then we will try to execute the ransomware itself, the active component that will go about encrypting files or manipulating the system, so there will be crippled access to some parts of the system, and then you need to pay the ransom to get rid of it.
Okay, so regardless of the attack vector, we're going to have some malware running. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to focus on this box, on this malware box here, and we're going to see some examples of how we can build some simple malware that can be delivered through any of the vectors above.
And you guys, sorry, but you guys will see some of the attack vectors in the last talk today about phishing. So that will cover most of the things related to the user behavior part of this.
Right. So for now, we focus on the malware itself. And then, yeah, it can be an email. You can browse to it. You can plug in a malicious USB stick, whatever vector. All right. So demos. Back to demos. OK. This is going to be our victim. So this is an attacker's web server. So what we're going to do is we're just going to browse the attacker web server and download malware and run it. Again, we're not focusing on how to deliver that. Right. So remember Hidden Tier? It was the first version of the open source ransomware, the one with a lot of basic flaws. That's still online. So I took it and just, well, I built it and we can run it now to see how it looked like.
Yeah, if you do so, that will obviously end up in your antivirus as a hit. So be sure.
Yes. If you just take the code from GitHub.
Be sure to be prepared.
Yes. So it's now disabled here, so we don't get any warnings. So let's see. In my documents folder, I have my important document.docx with some important information in it. OK, so let's download Hidden Tier.exe. And I'll save it on our desktop. Now, this is an executable file with a PDF icon. You have them here. So this is going to generate a random key. It's going to encrypt your files with that. And then it's going to send the key to the attacker. So this is the attacker. The attacker is here. It will just have a simple web server. And these are just the web server logs. So the victim will make a GET request with the key as a parameter. OK, so let's double-click that. Run. Now, two things happen. First of all, our document is renamed to .locked and is actually encrypted. And then we have a new file on the desktop. It's also a classic behavior, either writing a file or changing your desktop background. It's also classic.
Or hijacking the web browser start page or something like that. So.
Yeah, and you can write whichever message you want to tell your victims. OK, so on the attacker side, we have got this request. We have some information. So we infected the client 01. The username was admin. And this is the encryption key. So whenever that guy pays, you can send this key back, and he will be able to decrypt the files. And there is actually a decryptor. I'm copying this now. There is a decryptor application that the victim can run, or you can paste the key that you got from the attacker. And decrypt my files, and you're back. OK? So pretty simple. But this is pretty much what they all do in different formats. It can be different types of files. It can be just local files. It can be network shares. There's been an evolution here. I mean, first ones were really basic. Now we're seeing much more advanced type of ransomware. That will also delete your local shadow file so you can't restore the system. I mean, they do nasty stuff. Yeah.
And then there has obviously been different type of implementation in terms of cryptographic standards or functions used by these ransomware So some of them were using symmetric encryptions, others, which is more popular today, to use asymmetric encryption, so public-private key encryption, which is much easier for them to deal with these keys. So they have a centralized key per generation, maybe, or something like that, and they don't need to bother about a particular decryption key for that machine. It could be by campaign or by target that they will run those decryption keys. And then some of them obviously had stored their keys in local system as well. So I guess we're not encountering any of these anymore. That was more back in the days where they maybe didn't have that type of infrastructure on the net. But today, nobody is supposed to do that anymore. So that was the first version of the open source, right?
Yeah, that's right. That was the first version. So just to give you a feeling for what it did.
Yeah.
OK, now, for all the other examples, we're going to use a different type of malware. This is something we coded, so it's never going to be detected by an antivirus unless, well, it's been spread in the wild.
Yeah, that's the other hard thing about this. It says, well, what about detection? Well, if no AV has seen this before, then it's unknown. So are there any behavioral patterns I can look for? Well, sure there are. If you look for heavy I/O, disk I/O, and heavy usage of crypto operations, that could be a lead towards, oh, there is a ransom running or trying to do something in your system. But what if you already have something else doing the same thing, like a web browser? Your web browser today is doing very heavy crypto operations. At the same time, it may be doing very heavy I/O operations on your disk for temporary files and so forth. So yes, there are patterns, but they are very tricky. So false positives are there to stay. And then AV probably won't have that very much reliability on looking into the patterns only. We need to have some signatures as well. But yeah. I mean, we're getting all these detection chamber type of style. All of the big vendors are delivering, okay, you take that XTCO, we'll send it to the cloud service, it will be analyzed for you, and we will tell you whether this is a go or no go. So that will, of course, disturb the user experience. They have a delay added, or they cannot execute that file they downloaded. It might be a legit tool. They need to run it immediately, but we need sometimes to accept some of these limitations if we want to inform a better detection for this.
OK, so let's just take a look at this demo ransomware.exe. We're going to use that for our examples. We're going to save that. We're going to run it. And this is the effect. Remember that? So it's the same image that was used by the DE decryptor, which was based on the second version of the open source ransomware EDA2. OK, so that's what it does. So we're going to try to package this in different ways so that we can get a victim to execute it. So let's go back. OK, so first, we're going to do a classic. We're going to write a malicious macro in a Word document.
I don't want to be the first person giving somebody else an idea about the next maybe type of ransomware, but what if a ransomware starts encrypting your hard drive using BitLocker and don't give you the key? That would be a very interesting generation if we ever to encounter in the wild. I don't know, but it feels like there should be some possibilities. So please, everybody listening to this or seeing this, don't blame me in the future if you see that.
All right, so I created just an empty document called demo macro. I'm going to view macros. We're going to give it a name. We're going to call it auto open. That will open automatically we run automatically when the document opens. We're going to save it into our demo macro.docx document. Create. All right, so here we can write our code. OK? So this is what we're going to write. Commands. Let me just make this a little bigger and maybe we'll wrap. OK. So this is what we're going to run. We're going to do PowerShell again, because why not? And we're going to download the demo ransomware.exe from the attacker. And we're going to run it. I mean, it's that simple. We basic export that command. And this will be our macro. We're going to call, or we're going to define our string to be PowerShell with hidden window, no logo, and encode the command is the one defined above. And then we're going to create a Windows scripting host shell object, and we're going to run that command. So copy, paste. Let's clean it a bit. There it is. So we're going to save it now. Now we have this message when we try and save it, because this contains a macro. So we can either save it as a macro-free document with the docx format, which will basically disallow macros to run if it has that format. Or you can save it in the docm format, which is macro-enabled documents. So we'll easily spot it as a user if that document contains a macro or something to run. However, there is a small trick here. You don't necessarily need to save it in docm if you use the older version .doc for Word 97 2003. Now that will still contain macros without telling you it's a macro-enabled document.
So the effect will be you will not notice that this includes a macro before it's maybe too late. You need to open the document to figure out that there is, or for Word to tell you that there is a macro in it. Whilst the other model, which Office is moving towards since a year or a couple of years ago, is to make a distinction based on the document format or extension of the document. Already there, you can spot this is macro-enabled, this is not macro-enabled.
OK. So let's put that, we're going to send this in email or USB stick, whatever vector. Now we're just going to put it on the attacker web server. Demo macro. The victim will browse there and happily fetch that file. Save it. Open it. We'll enable the editing. That's with anything you download from the internet.
And in many of these, this kind of files, there is actually a message in the file when you open it that says, hey, to be able to see the real content of the file, you have to click on that button. So there is an arrow pointing at where the enable active
there are a lot
content.
of there are a lot of nice examples of social engineering here where you actually write stuff in here that will really want to, it really make you want to click that button. So you do that. And then it's too late. OK?
So as I said, different ways to get to the same target, which is running code, the malicious code, on that workstation. And the delivery methods you've seen so far, well, you happen to download something either directly or you get it embedded into something that will later on a later stage download it and run it for you.
Right. So basically, we were executing a macro here. I mean, a macro has script, so it is a script in a sense, but we can give it a separate category since it's so popular again. All right. Next, we're gonna make a special picture, which is not really a picture; it's just gonna be named picture. But a lot of people fall for this. It's actually a JavaScript file. That pretends to be a picture by context, I guess. And JavaScript on Windows, if you just double-click a .js file, on Windows, it will run with the Windows scripting host engine. And it will run as a script on the OS. So
I guess some of you guys remember the love letter back in the days. Any good memories from that? This is a similar one, but it's not gonna just wipe your MP3s. This one is doing some ransomware.
Okay, I'm gonna call it demo picture javascript.js. Edit. So this is what we're going to put in it. Remember that PowerShell we use in the macro? Well, we're going to do exactly the same. Why not? Save. Now, if you put this on a web server and you click it, it will actually be displayed in the web browser. It won't be executed. I mean, it won't be downloaded automatically. But of course, I mean, if you put it in a USB stick and you double-click it, it will run directly.
Yeah.
Or if you put it in a zip file, you send it in attachment or put it on a website, then you'll get it to be downloaded. So demo, picture javascript.zip, put it on the web server. Client goes there again. He really wants to be infected again, so he's going to download this. Well, let's do open. It's going to be this JavaScript file. Now it's on the client, so it's going to run here. And once again, we are infected. Okay, simple, nothing special really. You just put your file in your code in a JavaScript file, and you get someone to click it. It's always up to the user, really. Unless you have an exploit in, for example, your browser or in a browser plugin, then you actually don't need user interaction. You just need to perhaps browse to a site that will exploit the vulnerability. Okay. Next. SVG file. Remember this? This was an SVG file. So let's create that. All right, so what do we need? Well, first of all, we'll need an SVG image. This is the content of that image. Okay, let's do it like this. Okay, so this contains the active. Well, it can contain active content, and here basically you can have whatever script you want to have. Oops. Okay, I can do that. There you go. All right, so that's a simple script that will redirect your browser to wherever location. So you can combine this with phishing attack, like we saw in the Locky spreading attempt using the SVG files. When you click the image, it will redirect to that fake YouTube site, right? So this is pretty much what it does. And if you remove that, let's take just a copy of that and remove the script. And open it. This will open with Internet Explorer by default. And it's the image as defined in the file. If you add that script and you open that, then it will be redirected to you will be redirected to whatever location is specified in there. right? In this case, the attacker site. Now, of course, here you can have whatever you want. So you can just take a clone of the Facebook login page, put it on your site, and redirect the victim here. They will write their username and password, most likely. Or, well, if you ask nicely enough.
So this is often combined with some other type of phishing attacks, or there is a next stage doing something. Once you get them to that site will try to convince them to install a plugin or something like that, and then the actions will just follow.
OK. So this is running in the browser, right? So the script you are inserting into the image, it's a browser-based script, it's JavaScript. So we don't get access to the client, well, to the OS directly, unless we have vulnerability in the browser. So another way of doing something similar is to use HTML applications or HTA files. HTA files will run on the client. I mean, will run on the OS as HTML applications. This is an example, picture.hta. If we look into that, it's defined like this. You have some headers for the application, and then you have, in this case, VB script. So we're going to, once again, do the same thing. We're going to run PowerShell, download the ransomware, and run it. And then we also have an embedded image here to just show as part of the application, so the victim will actually have something to look at. Either to make it believe it is a real application, or to mock them.
Yeah. So HTA is part of the Windows scripting host components. I know some of you guys might have been using those for logon scripts and similar activities.
So let's take it into a zip file, picture hta.zip. Open. I'm going to open that. We're going to run it. This was the embedded image, or whatever you want that application to do, really. And of course, the malware ran. So see, there are so many ways of doing this.
Yeah, just once again, this is all to have that targeted user just to run any of this, and then make sure the code is executing in behind. And then I guess the opportunity for regular user, non-IT oriented, to figure out, hey, something bad is going to happen if I double-click this guy. I think that's what these guys relies on in terms of success factors.
All right, we're going to see one more example. This is a bit different. We're going to make a small package. So remember the earlier session, first session, when I did the client-side attack? There was just something that the user clicked and ran, and he actually had the tool. It was a real tool, but there was something else happening in the background. So that was a self-extracting package built this way. So take, for example, this file, vlc2.exe. If we open this with an archive manager, this is what's in it. There are two files. There is the real VLC, and there is an extra file, batch file. What's in it? You can guess at this point. You know exactly what's in it. This is a bit different, actually, because we're not going to download an executable, put it on disk, and run it. We're going to do it in a stealthier way. We're going to use PowerShell Actually, this is a version of the same ransomware, but in PowerShell. So we're going to run a PowerShell script. And we're going to use the invoke expression functionality in PowerShell, like I did before. Remember, in the other demo, when I downloaded stuff and ran it all the time, this is how I was doing it. So we're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Our colleague Kenneth will talk a lot about PowerShell later. So you'll get some insights. OK, so this package has been built with a certain configuration that will tell it to first run this command and then run VLC as soon as you double-click it. So let's look at the effect. VLC to save file, put it on the desktop, open it. Now this is VLC, verified publisher, right? Because that's the real VLC in the package. Actually, we don't need to go through with this. We don't actually want to install VLC because the malware already ran.
It's already there.
It was that first warning that we should have acted on because the package is not signed. We accepted that, and then the binary inside was signed, but there was something extra in the package. All right? So those were a few examples of...
You had one more example, right?
Possibly. Well, I have. I can go all day if you want to.
Creating a link is quite interesting.
Which one?
To see. The link.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice.
See, sometimes I have to remind him about something. Awesome. Gonna happen.
Yeah, this is a pretty, it's very simple and also very effective way of doing it. If you create a shortcut, new shortcut. Now, you can give it the location of the item you want to open from the shortcut. This can be anything. A file, well, it's going to be a file, but it can also be PowerShell.
Of course.
Or CMD.
Yeah.
Or whatever on the system. So let's... This is going to be the location of our item. OK? We're going to do it here directly. That's our PowerShell command. Next, what are we going to call it? We're going to call it my awesome pictures. Finish. Now, this will have the PowerShell icon by default because we're calling PowerShell. But it's a shortcut. We can easily change the icon. Change icon. Let's take whatever may look legit. Should we take this folder with media in it? That's it.
So if something drops that shortcut on your desktop, or if it is on a USB stick, or if it is on a charger of your e-cigarette, or wherever you can imagine, drawing attention to it and making somebody cannot resist double-clicking and open it.
So that won't give you any warnings if you already have it on the system.
Yeah.
I mean, if you got it through a media drive. If you download it from the internet, it will still ask you if you want to open it, as with anything you download from the internet.
Based on zone information.
But once you clicked it, it's already too late. It's just going to run that PowerShell command. Yeah, thanks for reminding that. This was interesting.
And by the way, if you copy this to a web server, if you download it, wherever you put it, because the link is to a standard library in Windows for the icon stuff, the same icon will appear all over the place as far as that library exists on these systems.
Yeah,
So
that's right. OK, so let's really quickly look at a different approach. Because as I mentioned at the beginning, enterprise-targeted attacks, which are not necessarily starting from the client-side attack. they can, and in most cases do, but sometimes they start from a server-based attack. There has been some of these actually in the wild, and they are, increasing in that area too. This is an example, SAMAS or sam.exe. So the way it works, it's a semi-automated. At least the first stage is semi-automated. So there is a scanner for web vulnerabilities. In this case, it was targeting web logic servers.
Yeah.
If you found a vulnerability, it would upload a web shell. You remember that tunnel.aspx we showed in the previous session to make a SOX proxy on top of HTTP? They're going to upload that, and then they're going to start. Somebody else from the team is probably going to go in and do some manual work and looking for credentials and reusing them in the environment. It's going to delete local shadow files from the system so you can recover your systems. And then it's going to install and, it's going to launch ransomware on as many systems as possible.
And of course, put some messages on screens and so forth. So just to tell the admins of that system, hey, you have to pay, or we will remove your systems, destroy whatever your database is, or whatever you can imagine of.
So it's obviously a different type of tactics and strategies and techniques, and involves internal escalation as well. And it's a little different model as well in terms of profit, because if you look at mass deployed, client-side-based ransomware attacks, well, they easily generate millions of dollars if it's a successful campaign. This one is something you need to spend more time on, and it will give you, individually a higher sum, but, it's only one or a few. And the good things for the attacker is that, well, you don't actually need an infrastructure where you need to keep track of the defections, change the keys, and all that stuff. And you're also less exposed, right?
One big hit instead of many small hits. Yeah. So they will get all the money in one,
Yeah, and then they can lay low for a year. So.
So we got a very recent example of this, of course, the one that Marcus started with the day today. The San Francisco rail system was hacked just these weeks, and then they asked for, what was the amount, $37,000 or something like that?
Or 70-ish?
$70,000, yeah. So this screen was, or similar screen or text was on the screens for their ticketing stations all over San Francisco. So they took down the whole system, basically. So they had to look at that and negotiate. And then there is a real funny story behind the attackers or the creators of this ransomware were actually hacked themselves.
So they left the email address where they wanted to be contacted to negotiate the ransom.
And then somebody went to that email system, and then they did a password reset on that email address, and then stepped into that inbox, and they figured out, hey, there are username and passwords for the command and control systems. So they went there, and then,
they found other infected clients. They saw how they were, or either victims and other attacks.
And the traces led back to Iran/Russia for the persons who were behind these command and control servers.
Yeah, and the password is that question was your favorite computer game. Somebody guessed it right.
Okay, so this is what's going on, and then we see that these things are targeting enterprises as well. It's not a consumer side effect anymore.
Right. So putting the pieces together, something to think about, something that we haven't seen so widely spread yet.
No.
But I think is going to come. I mean, it has to.
So this is basically,
if you look at the evolution of things, everything has been, like successful malware in the past, the one that is being made as a worm, so self-propagating malware.
So the self-spreading technique together with the ransomware technique, I guess that's what we're going to see next.
Yes, so it's quite scary, but we have examples of how things propagate, so we can work proactively.
Okay.
All right, so 30 seconds about prevention.
What to do.
Backups, of course, you want to have them offline, because if you end up in an enterprise-targeted attack and they actually manage to compromise your backups, then, yeah, you're going to have to pay. You can try and restore your systems if they haven't deleted the shadow files. You want to make sure you don't have high privileges. You only need, well, you should only have what you really need.
Yeah.
And this is true locally in the domain, especially in the network shares. Just think where you have write access.
I
in
guess
your network.
that's the biggest challenge in enterprises, those gigantic network shares we have with a whole lot of easiness to start
Yep.
tampering with files on them.
And of course, awareness, which is what we're trying to work with right now.
Don't click, never click.
All right. And then, of course, you can either reverse it if you're lucky enough to get a crappy ransomware on your systems, or you're going to have to restore your backups, possibly restore points of your systems. Otherwise, you're going to have to pay if you want your data back. That's it.
Cool. Thank you, guys.